All right, YouTube and Craps Nation. Welcome to take 4 of part 4 of the LFC, KPI, OBS, Skype, etc. tutorial. Hopefully, I'm going to nail it this time. Tried to do it 3 other times over the past week, and I've just been too exhausted to even think straight. Every time I think I got it, boom, it blows up. Anyways, where we left off in part 3, we've created a couple of scenes. We got the scenes created. We got Skype with the NDI video source, audio video source. Showed you real quick the hotkeys. On my keyboard, I'm using the F1, F2. It's actually the help and the undo buttons, the way I've got it mapped out. And again, you can use an Elgato Stream Deck. USB keypad you can get off Amazon for 40, 50 bucks, sometimes less. Just make sure you do your research. Make sure it's going to be programmable to some extent. Most of the keypads you get, if you find one that has like red switch, blue switch, stuff like that, almost all of those are going to be programmable because they're made for gamers. So they can program those keys to do what they want, and it can cost a lot less than the Elgato. So, without further ado, I want to do some advanced scene setup with the NDI and the Skype and the hotkeys to show you how I think I'm going to do this. I think it's going to work out well. One of the things that you don't know week to week is who's going to show up for LFC. So you can either redo all of your scenes to put everybody in, take the people that aren't there out, put the people that are there back in, set up their NDI, do the transform with the stretch to inner bounds, all those steps, or we can cut it down to, I think it's 2 steps. Let's find out. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these 2 scenes that we created. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of shooter 2. Yes, actually, yeah, we'll go ahead and get rid of this one as well. So what we're left with is just our main layout. And I'm going to go in here, I'm going to create, I'm just going to do 4 for today. That should be enough. I'm probably going to end up doing about 9 of them altogether because that's how many hotkeys I've got room for. And I don't know if I've ever seen 9 players on LFC. It's always possible, so plan for it. All right, so we're going to have shooter 1, shooter 2, shooter 3, shooter 4, and actually let's go ahead and do 5. Shooter 5. Now, let's create some additional scenes. So we've got those. We're going to actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and set our hotkeys up. So again, go to File, Settings, Hotkeys. In the filter, just type in Scene. That gets rid of all the other stuff that we don't care about right now. And shooter 1 is going to be I'm just going to put these in order. So for me, it's F1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the num lock turned off, then remap to Alt and the number pad. It's complicated. However you do it, whatever keys you want, go ahead and use those. You probably do not want to use the function keys directly because F1 brings up help in most applications. F5 does a refresh, F11 goes to full screen. They have other things that different applications use them for. So don't use the function keys directly if you can avoid it, and you don't want to remap them because you do need them once in a while on the, anyways, up to you. So we've got those, and okay, and they won't, you can see down here in my scene list, it is cycling through, but of course I've got nothing but a blank on all of them. All right, now let's create our, we're going to now create a scene per person. So we don't care if they're shooting today or not. If somebody is a new shooter, we'll create them a scene. And let's call it Skype. And let's start with George. We'll do silent shooter. G-dub. Who's our other frequent flyers? Lightning. And forgive me, I'm a little bit anal here. I want that hyphen in there. I want all these to look the same as much as possible. And of course, me. I'm going to call this my overhead camera. And let's start with myself. So we will add a source, and we're going to do video capture device. And we're going to call that overhead cam. And it's going to be my HD web camera that looks overhead. Beautiful. There's that. Let's go ahead and do lightning shooter. And I can't actually do this because I'm not in a Skype call with everyone. I'm just in a Skype call with myself. So we are going to play pretend here. Guess we've all got kids and or grandkids, and we know how to play pretend, right? All right. So let's call it NDI Lightning. And we are going to, so this is where you would choose his camera. And this can get really painful. You see here, my ID, my live ID, Troy.settle. That's really easy. If you know my name, there it is. A lot of people, when they're in the Skype, just have a number in there. So it can be a little bit painful to find everybody. And that's where, keep a notepad, just pencil and paper handy, pen and paper. So you can jot down names or associate a few digits, the last few digits of each Skype number to a name, so that you can keep them all straight as you're going through the first couple of times. So we're going to add Troy and hit OK. It should pop up. There we go. And again, this is the default resolution, kind of small. So we're going to go ahead and make it big by going to the transform, edit transform. Change the bounding box scale to inner bounds, and we're going to make that the full size of our canvas. In my case, 1920 by 1080. If you're doing a 720p stream, then you would do, I forget what it is, 1280 by 720, something like that. So we'll do that, hit close. Now we want to be able to identify this when we're looking at it. So we know it's lightning, but when it's showing on the screen in your broadcast, it's not going to show that. So we can add a name to it. And so we'll just go to text. And we'll just call it name lightning. And you can play with the fonts, whatever you want to do there. I'm just going to pick one that's kind of random. Hey, that actually doesn't look too bad. Lightning shooter. And let's drop that font down. It starts at 256, 72. See what that does. That's a little bit small. So let's make it, how about 144? That shouldn't be too bad. And play with it. See, find a font and a font size, a font weight, all that stuff that you like. Now down here lower in this, you can change your background color. It can even be a gradient. Now we don't want to do a gradient for today. That gets a little bit wonky. Background opacity. So you see up here in the corner of the screen, it's a little hard to read because of the background, which you can't always control what that background is going to look like. So there's that. I'll put a space in there. All right. Okay. And that looks pretty decent. We'll go with it. Drop it into whatever location you want. Uh, you might need to change corners depending on what your participants are sending to you, but it all works. Tailor this to meet your needs. All good. I think George even takes the name and puts it outside this video source, and that works just as well. For me, I think I like it inside the video source, inside the scene. Now, Lightning Shooter is set up. So even if he skips a week, his NDI source should never change unless he comes in on a new Skype account. And what we can do is we say, let's say Lightning Shooter, we want to be Shooter 1. So we just come into Shooter 1. We're going to add a source, which is going to be a scene. So we do that. And let's add Lightning Shooter. Hit OK. And there's his video. And then we also want to go ahead and add the main layout scene. So let's do that. And it'll put it right on top of it. And there you go. There's Lightning Shooter. You got the KPI up, his video feed. And you got a caption on there so our audience knows who is, who's the focus on. All right, we do the same thing with GDub. So let's go to Lightning Shooter. And I'm going to copy his name because I've already got the size, the font, all that is already set up. We don't need to do that over and over again. If we can copy and then come into GDub and we can paste that in there. So we'll paste that. And two ways to paste it. One is a reference, which will make the same scene or the same source, exact same source, available to multiple scenes. And you can do that. But if you make a change, it changes it in all the scenes. So we want to paste a duplicate. And you see there it does name Lightning 2. So we can come in here, we can rename that. And who are we doing now? GDub. And we can come right in here. So we don't even have to open up the properties or anything. The important stuff is right here already. There's GDub. All right, and we need GDub's NDI source. And as I'm adding this, I realized that we just did something. I missed a step. So NDI GDub. Okay. We will select GDub's source. And again, I don't have a real Skype call going. So I'm going to have to select myself again. But that's good enough because, again, we're playing pretend. And we want the name on top. And once again, there's the transform that we need to apply. So instead of going up there and typing in all those numbers, we can just copy it from another source. So right click on the NDI source that we've already transformed, go to transform in the menu and copy. Come back to GDub, right click on that source and transform. And here we're going to do a paste transform. And there it is. Now let's say GDub is going to, so we got Lightning at Shooter 1. Let's say GDub is going to be Shooter 2. So Shooter 2, we're just going to come in here and we're going to add a scene as a source. And we want Skype GDub. There's that. Boom. There's his video feed and his name. And then we want the main layout. Where is, keep losing that item in there. So there's the main layout. And there we go. So we got Shooter 1 is Lightning. Shooter 2, we got GDub. And again, on my keyboard, I can do that right there. All right, so I'm just going to fly through Silent Shooter. Let's copy that source. Go to Silent Shooter. We're going to paste it as a duplicate. We are going to rename it. There's Silent Shooter. And we're going to add the NDI source. And once again, I forgot to do something with this. So I'm going to do this again. NDI Silent Shooter. Select our NDI source. There's our player. And this NDI source, remember, we need to kill the audio on these. So volume all the way down, hit the mute, click the little gear thing, lock it, click the gear thing again, and hide. We don't want those audio sources because they will trample. Basically, Skype audio will trample all over itself. So that's a lock and hide. There's lightning shooter. Turn that all the way down, mute, lock, and hide. All right, so we got rid of all those. All right, so lightning shooter, oh, we need to copy the transform, remember that. So again, select your source, transform, copy transform, go into silent shooter, right click, transform, and paste transform. Boom, there's silent shooter. So we got lightning, GW, and silent. Now, let's say this is where I think it's going to make it a lot easier. So again, we've set up lightning shooter as shooter 1. We've set up GW shooter 2. And let's say lightning shooter isn't able to make the game this week. So what do? We can actually come in here, and lightning shooter is not going to be our shooter today. Shooter 1. Are you sure you want to remove? Yes. And then we can come back in here and we can add silent shooter in as shooter 1. So now instead of lightning shooter, we have silent shooter, shooter 1. GW is still shooter 2. We did not have to change any of our hotkeys. We didn't have to do none of that stuff. So let's go in here. I'm going to make the sources for George. So George, we need NDI. And George, Henry, Gary, and I don't know who lightning shooter is. How about that? Guys, I hope you don't mind me using your names in my demo. It's just going to be the way it is. So again, NDI source comes in, kill the audio completely, drop the volume down, mute it, lock the volume, and then hide it. Boom. So all the way down, muted, locked, and hidden. If that audio bleeds in, you've done something horribly wrong, and that's okay. You figure it out. So again, we're going to copy the transform. So transform, copy, copy, copy. Where is the copy? Copy transform. Come in here, right click. We're going to paste the transform. Boom, that fixes our video. We need our captions. So there we'll just copy. Come back to George and paste duplicate. I don't really wish this did. Oops, I changed scenes. What did I do? Oh, I don't know where I'm at. Right click, rename. Name is George. Fix the text here. There's George. From CY. Okay. So we got that. Beautiful. And now here's another thing, doing it this way, and I have, again, no idea how anybody else does this, how they track it. Well, I think George is the only other one that's done this. So here in the setup and reference, so who are our shooters? Oh, shooter 5, we need to add my overhead camera. Let's copy this name here, go to the overhead, paste, duplicate, right click, rename. There's that. Yours truly. Okay, so our shooters, we're going to have GW, George. I don't even have lightning shooter in there. How about that? GW, George, lightning, and silent. All right. So there's our shooters for today. Now, we've already got these shooters over here. Shooter 1, silent shooter, GW shooter 2. Oh, shooter 3. Who's going to be shooter 3? Let's make shooter 3 George. So add a scene. Skype George, add a scene. Main layout. Shooter 4. So who do we have? We had silent, GW, George, shooter 4. Add a scene. Make that lightning. Add another scene as a source, main layout. There's that. Shooter 5, yours truly. So scene. Where's my overhead? There it is. All right. And of course, we want the main layout. Okay. So once again, we got silent shooter. Shooter 1 is silent. GW shooter 2. George shooter 3. Lightning shooter 4. And PSO is shooter 5. We need to make sure that all that lines up here. Now, one of the things, and I'm pretty sure I know why George does this. He's always the last shooter. It's probably because, you know, he just the way he's got everything set up. So I want to be able to randomize the shooters. So if I highlight all my shooters for today, right click on that selection. So I select them, and then right click and select randomize. So Google just randomized these for me. So let's go ahead and we can redo these. So shooter 1, we can dump silent shooter. Yes. And let's add scene. There's that. Shooter. We want to, and then just make sure that your layouts are, your scenes are, your sources are in the correct order. Shooter 2 is going to be silent shooter, so I get rid of GW. Come back in here, and we will add silent shooter. Bump them down a level. All right, shooter 3 is going to be GW. So scene, GW, okay. And we get rid of George here. Bye, George. Now we got the main layout in GW. Shooter 4, shooter 2, silent shooter, shooter 3 is GW, shooter 4 is lightning shooter, and shooter 5 is going to be George. So I get rid of my camera and bring George back in. And there we go. Welcome back, George. All right. So now, again, without having to mess with my hotkeys or anything else, I've got a random shooter order, so it's not the same every week. There we go. Shooter 1, shooter 2, shooter 3, shooter 4, and shooter 5. And it can be that easy. Okay. Something else that you might want to consider, and I'm not sure how others have done this, how George has done this, but for Skype, we've got a thing called virtual camera, or I should say OBS has a utility called virtual camera. And the virtual camera will show whatever is being broadcast. So if we start I'm starting the virtual camera. Let's come over here to my Skype video. If I can, I guess, drag this over here. Hopefully that shows. Let's see if that shows up. Yes, it does. All right. Get rid of that other copy of OBS. Now, right now I've got my camera set. I don't know what I'm using for a camera right now. Showing something black. Oh, I guess I don't have a video feed at all. So here I'm using my USB 2 camera. Oh, my monitor's in the way. How about that? So that's what I'm sending to Skype right now, but I don't have to. I can send it the video feed from the OBS virtual camera. And so with that, let's go ahead and leave that preview. Let's see if I can make this work so it's all in the recording. All right, so you can see what I'm sending here, and right now it's set for George from CY, and it includes the KPI layout. And to me that's really cool because now I don't have, your participants don't have to wait for YouTube streaming to catch up to see what's going on with the KPI. And if you make a mistake on your roll entries, you can catch it that much faster if you got more eyeballs on the whole thing. Now, some people are going to be using their phone, they're going to have it set up, they're not even going to be able to look at it. That's okay. The video you're sending them doesn't really matter. So, but you can see here as I change scenes in OBS, it also changes scenes in Skype. And it keeps the KPI and all that up there. And it doesn't take any extra processing power or anything like that to do this. It just taps that video, sends it to Skype. Skype does what it does. All right. I think that's going to do it for this part of the tutorial. And in part 5, I'm going to dive into adding the other things from the KPI, a stat screen. We can create a stat screen. We can create, add in the shooter history, the last 3 shooters, 5 shooters, 7 shooters, however many you want, and then get the layout, fine tune the layout, because like right here, we haven't even added YouTube chat. And whatnot. So we're not going to be able to actually use full screen, let the participants' video consume the entire broadcast. We're going to have to size them down to make room for everything else that we want to get on our screen. But at its very basic core, this is enough to do live fantasy craps with 5 shooters in order. All the necessary information, the current gameplay and the role history is there. And that's enough to get you going for hosting LFC. But I want to put more spit and polish on this, so we will do that starting in part 5. Until then, may the dice be kind, and we'll see you at LFC.